Welcome to the Self Within podcast, where we will look to ancient traditions and modern insights to seek guidance, knowledge, and practical tools to help us reconnect with our true selves. Join me, your host, as we explore various topics from mindfulness and meditation to energy healing, astrology, and much more. We are going to be talking about astrology today. This is one of my favorite topics. I feel like I sometimes live my life based on what is going on in the sky, but also the astrology of my chart and also other people's charts that I know. And, I think one of the big things about astrology is that it tends to get this really bad rep, seen as this very woo-woo mystical subject. And there's a part of me that understands that, right? I understand why the skepticism. How can the position of the stars, the constellations, what we're seeing in the sky really tell us more about ourselves or what we're meant to do in this lifetime, our purpose, all of these things that I think so many of us are searching for meaning in. And so it feels a bit unbelievable. But I can tell you that at least from the years of studying and the deeper and deeper that I've gotten into the topic, there really is something to be said about astrology. And there is truth behind this practice. It is so much more than what so many of us grew up with, which was like the Cosmopolitan or those magazine horoscopes, right? It's so much more than that. And joining me today for this discussion is Priya Zander Fox, who is a therapist, clinical social worker, and astrologer who integrates astrology in work with her clients. So welcome, Priya.
Thank you, Annabelle. I am so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I can't wait to hear your perspective on this topic because I really want to first get into how did astrology find you, or how did you end up finding astrology?
I think astrology did find me. I think you said it right the first time. So I was a teenager, a late teenager, floundering, wandering, not knowing what I was supposed to be doing, dealing with some family of origin issues that I really needed to work through, and feeling a little lost there, not only in relationship there, but also in the direction career-wise in my life. And it was at a time where a lot of my friends were very focused and knew what they wanted to do and were moving ahead. And I really was thinking, what's wrong with me? I should also be like them and know that. I was looking for some spiritual guidance, and I stumbled across a wonderful astrologer in New York City, which is where I was living at the time. And when she read my chart to me, I sighed a deep sigh of relief. It's like somebody really understood what I was going through and the way that I was slanted, like meaning who I am, what proclivities I have in life, my leanings, my interests. So this relief, this verification, like I am who I am. I can't be you. I can't be anybody else. I'm me. And my personal chart is very relational. It's very relationship oriented. It's very spiritually oriented. And it let me rest inside of myself and say, it's okay. It's okay. I don't want to be a lawyer. It's okay, that I didn't go through college at the traditional age. I went back in my 50s. So that's my short answer.
Yeah, I totally understand. I really resonate with what you said about astrology helping you be seen. Similarly, I had these parts of myself that I just didn't like, and I didn't understand them, but I knew that other people saw them as flaws or parts of me that I wanted to change. When I first got into
Mhm.
astrology, there was this like acceptance or this sigh of relief, like, oh, this was the person I was always meant to be. And yes, we can use the knowledge to shift, to improve ourselves, but it's not something to shy away from or to run away from. It's just a part of our makeup. And that's
Mhm.
what I really loved about astrology.
Right. It really gives us a point of acceptance of all of who we are. We all have our shiny, sunny parts. We all have our shadow parts. We all have things we struggle with, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And astrology can help us understand ways to deal with some of the hard things.
Yeah. What I'm curious about is as a therapist, which
Mhm.
you go through years and years of study, years and years of practice. How did you end up coming to the decision of integrating astrology into your work? Because these two different areas or fields of study, they don't necessarily seem to make sense. So I love to hear your take on how these two came together when you're working with clients.
Sure, it's a great question because I do think people see those two subjects or fields as kind of disparate, and they're really not. For me, it was easy. I have to admit that it was kind of an easy addition. It wasn't even a thought for me. Astrology is so helpful in terms of having a lens into somebody and really being able to kind of get like a little bit of an understanding or at least a real curiosity with questions that I would have for the person. And because I started my career and my path was so driven by the spiritual, and I had done so much studying and had gone to a couple of major healing schools and came to the more traditional psychological model later. It was easy because it's my home base and I'm already considered alternative
Mm,
in very many ways. I don't really take traditional approaches, although I use traditional psychology as well and have studied that as well and found that very helpful as well. But it was an easy decision for me. I know several colleagues and different clients that I have struggled with that, especially if they come from the more traditional model first, that it might seem a little too woo-woo, a little too edgy, a little too like in the margins.
yeah.
And I understand that because they're known in a certain way and the models probably more acceptable across the board still. Although when I started in the late 70s, this woo woo was way woo woo.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way in my perspective. That there's Reiki even in a hospital or homeopathy in a hospital. It's big here in the United States.
Yeah, I totally see your point there. Yeah.
Mhm.
What are the benefits of having a person's chart and being able to see that and then combining that with, let's say, traditional talk therapy or the psychology that you mentioned?
Mhm.
Because I know how I use it, and I think similar to maybe what you said previously, it's that lens that lets you see a little bit deeper, maybe probe a little bit more. Uh,
Mhm. Sure. Okay, so I'm going to give you a really concrete example. So there are 10 major planets that make up our birth chart or natal chart. And each planet represents a certain sector of who we are. One might be like how we relate emotionally, one has to do with our ego, one about how we process information or communicate. So the process and communicating planet is Mercury,
mm,
the winged messenger. And so if I look at somebody's chart and I see Mercury is in a particular sign in a particular house, right? So we have 12 signs of the zodiac and we have 12 houses that they correlate with. And if it is in a sign that is, let's say, more inward or more demure in a house that's a little more hidden, then I'm not going to come out like gangbusters with the person. So it gives me an initial thought, or I'll wonder about that with them. Nothing takes the place of real live interaction.
mm.
So I would never sit with a client and say, well, you're supposed to be really quiet. Like, why are you not? Because if you look at the whole chart, maybe they have other things going on as well that would have them feel really comfortable with talking and be more extroverted. And we're complex. I always say to people in my practice, we're complex beings and we all have areas where we have our PhD and we all have areas where we're in preschool learning to tie our shoe.
I love that.
And it's true, and somehow that gets integrated into our personality there. So that's one way. I might look at somebody's chart and get really curious, like about their style of communication, like that.
Mm. Yeah, I love that you say that because I think there can be a perception with astrology that it's all predetermined, that your chart is somehow predetermining your life or who you are. And I think it's so important to really call that out and say that's not at all the case. It's really an evolution. That's how I see a birth chart, just like we evolve as humans. And to your point, right, we're PhDs in certain areas and we're preschoolers in other areas. We're constantly growing and improving, and it's part of the self-discovery process. And so there is not really a part of your chart that is predetermined because free will always, I think, reigns supreme in my perspective. I don't know what your take is on that.
I totally agree with you. Absolutely. Let's just say you were born into a family of ice skaters and you have some athletic ability. Like, is it predetermined you're going to turn out to be like an Olympic ice skater? Absolutely not. There are so many different things that are going to come in your path, including what you're drawn to, etc. Nothing is predetermined, but there are leanings. There are certain leanings. And I don't think the chart makes us lean that way. I think some people may not believe what I'm about to say, but when we are born, when the synchronicity of our choice in the universe, when it's that time to come down, we're coming down at a time that's in energetic attunement or alignment with who we are, with our soul, and what it is we need to do here, what our mission is. And so the chart is like a confirmation of that. But as you say, there's lots of wiggle room. I could use myself as an example. My life could have gone in many different ways. I could have not left college. I was an art history major. I was on track to work at a museum in New York City. That would have been a very different life.
Mm.
And that might have been a fine life, but it wasn't the life I wanted, that I was feeling driven toward. And yet it was helpful because studying arts and painting in particular for me, really understanding composition and color and everything that was in the frame, it totally is transferable in working with people and understanding anything. So it was very helpful, actually, in hindsight. At the time, I didn't feel it. At the time, I felt lost, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Where am I going? Like that. But it was helpful.
So, could you use astrology or did you use it for yourself to figure out what is the right career path for you, or what is maybe an area that you're struggling in, and kind of understanding that even better?
Yes, it did really help on my career path because there's a lot of leanings in my chart that are spiritual leanings. And while I grew up in a somewhat a little religious family, more culturally than like really practicing, my bend towards spirituality was a lot more than other people in my family. And so I was kind of like an oddity. Like, where did Priya come from? How did that happen? So I didn't get a lot of agreement for that in my family. So it helped me when I saw my chart to really see it and have it explained to me, like, you're being you, you're being who you need to be. And once I opened to that, quite honestly, then I started meeting the people that I needed to meet. So here's an example of that. I was living in Hoboken, New Jersey, and I was part of a women's group that was run by a wonderful psychologist, Marilyn Grayman, and it had a spiritual flavor to it. And I'm opening to all of this, and I get really sick while I'm in this group. I develop scarlet fever, and none of the doctors knew. I was like this medical mystery for about 3.5 weeks, suffering, like unable to walk. I had a pretty strong case of it. And finally, a doctor was able to diagnose me. A very old time doctor said, "Oh my gosh, scarlet fever, textbook case. Anybody should know this."
Oh, wow.
It took me a long time to recover. I had to really rehabilitate. So think I was out of work a good 6 weeks. And then on the heels of that, I developed something called Bell's palsy. And so that took a little while to heal from. And in this part, I had just started with this women's group. And I had reached out because this is before the internet and being able to stream movies. And I'm recuperating, but I'm bored, right? Because I'm like 20 something, thinking, oh my God, I'm stuck. And I asked the group, do you have any books that you would recommend? And so one woman in the group said, here's this book called Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan. And I opened the book and I read the first page. I think it was the dedication page, and I just started bawling. And I called the woman, Sylvia. I didn't know her very well. And I just said, what is this? Who is this? And she said, oh, well, I'm studying with this woman. She has a school. And I just knew I've got to be there. I've got to be there at all costs. So I think opening to who I really am, it allowed me to mingle with the world and to have conversations and because I'm accepting myself more there. So that's one way that it affected me. Now here's the part where I'm going to rat out myself. So I was struggling in my first marriage and I wanted to find answers and I kept combing over the chart. It's got to be in here. It's got to be in here. I do not recommend using astrology that way.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a divination tool. It can help us understand. And finally, I had a mentor in my life that just said, Priya, put it down. And I bow to her to this day that I was able to hear her advice and to let that go and needed to just do the inner work around what was happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's interesting though, and just going off topic a little bit, but I find that when people are really in these vulnerable states, it is like you just need answers. It doesn't matter where it comes from. You look to multiple things. And I did that myself where I was not even satisfied with an answer I was getting. And I went to a tarot reader and then I did astrology and then I was looking at oracle cards and I was like looking at quizzes online. I understand what that desperate place is where you're so
Absolutely.
confused and you just need someone to tell you what to do, actually. It's like, just tell me what to do. I'll do it.
Right. And a piece of the bottom line is it's really hard to be in pain and suffering, right? And not know. That's so difficult. And my heart goes out to all of us in that position. With different practices, I have found that has gotten easier in my life being in the unknown. But, certainly when you're making a major decision like that and you just can't find your way, you feel like you can't find yourself
Mm.
now, right? You want it from the outside. But anyway, I did the same thing. I saw many different readers during that time. I was right there with you.
Hey, I know you're really into this episode right now, but I want to take a moment to highlight something new and amazing that I recently discovered. It is the Antojai Quantum Reiki Tarot deck. Now, this isn't your average tarot deck. What makes it unique is that it is an all-in-one tarot deck. It is a traditional tarot, modified tarot, oracle deck, hybrid deck, and customizable deck all in one. It also has a bonus suit of cards called The Void that allows you to see situations outside of the matrix. Created by shamanic master and quantum healer Axel Carrasquillo, this deck blends ancient alchemy and modern neuroscience. Quantum Reiki is also embedded in the cards, which enhances the accuracy of the readings. Now, I've been working with this deck only a short time, and I can tell you that so far the insights received have been spot on. So whether you're a seasoned reader or just beginning your tarot journey, this deck will provide you with a new layer of guidance like you've never experienced before. So if you're interested in grabbing a copy of the Antojai Quantum Reiki Tarot, check it out on Etsy or take a look below at the description for a link. Now back to the episode. For people that are just getting into astrology, I think it's important to call out the fact that we are more than our sun sign. And I feel like I say that so much, but I
Sure.
think oftentimes People have said to me, I just don't feel like an Aries or a Taurus. And I would say it's probably accurate because
Right.
we are made up of all 10 planets and all 12 zodiac signs, and they're all in different areas in our birth chart. And so we may not be the traditional archetype or characteristic of whatever our sun sign is or whatever that horoscope sign is that so many of us, I think, probably know about ourselves.
That's right. It's a really great point that you bring up because it's one isolated planet out of 10. So while it is giving us information, it's giving us 1/10 of the
Mhm.
information. And then we base everything off of that. My suggestion to those people who say I don't relate is there's a great reason, as you said, that they don't relate. And they may, if they're interested, want to dig deeper into that. So I'll give you an example. So there are four elements, right? We have air, earth, fire, and water. And each sign is distributed in one of those elements. Somebody might have their sun in Aries and it's a fire sign, and maybe it's the only fire sign they have in their entire chart. And maybe they have a lot of water, and the water is deep, and the water brings a lot of emotions, and the water maybe have them feel a little more introverted. And so while they have this big sun sign in fire, because the sun sign is who we are in this lifetime, it's like part of our mission, but it's how we present. It's our chi, our energy, who we are. And they'll say, but I cry at every Hallmark commercial. Like, I don't feel fiery. I don't feel brave. I don't feel out there. Let's say they had five planets in water. I would say there is a good reason for that because maybe a lot of that water is sort of drowning that flame out. And another example, because certain signs get a bad rap, like Scorpio or Virgo, oh, Scorpio, like you must be witchy or evil or overly sexual. And so my son is in Scorpio. And so somebody could hear that and either feel like, whoa, or, hey, you don't seem like that to me. Let's say somebody who's more knowledgeable about astrology. Well, if you look at my chart, there's good reason because I have a lot of Pisces in my chart, and that's really going to mellow the whole Scorpio situation down, even though I do have three planets in Scorpio. So it's very interesting. It is so much deeper than your sun sign. I really would say to anybody who's really interested, have a professional reading. There's so many different platforms. You have your podcasts. There's so many great podcasts out there. You really can educate yourself and delve in a little more and understand a little more. You might be surprised. There's a whole other world out there than your sun sign.
And I would shout out the two books that I love, and they're by Deborah Silverman, but The Missing Element, one of my favorites, and it talks to the elements as you were just mentioning. And then her newest book, I Don't Believe in Astrology, which I still haven't finished, but I'm right in the middle of it. Love
Mhm.
it. Love it so much. And so if you are curious about the signs, how all of this mixes in and what all the planets mean, I would say that's a really great and very easy read because I have also gotten into the much more technical astrology books. And
Mhm.
sometimes they can be so in depth and they can go so over my head that
Mhm.
I try to capture what I can and I move on. But I love Deborah's style of writing. It's very easy.
I agree with you. It's very user friendly, and especially in the first book, too, The Missing Element. There are great quizzes in there. You can learn a lot about yourself in that book just by looking at the elements. And that's what's so interesting about astrology. There's so many different parts to it. And even just understanding that one part, I have seen people grow in leaps and bounds and have so much more understanding about what their highlights are, what they struggle with, maybe things that they can focus on a little, places to just really accept who
Mm.
they are. One thing I always love that Deborah says is she loves to give permission slips. And I love that idea. It's like, yes, you could be just who you are. That's what we need. The planet needs all of us to be who we are.
Right. Are there particular planets that you would look at, like when you're first working with a client, whether it's a reading or you're doing some talk therapy, or maybe if someone's in a transformational phase or going through some challenges, what are some planets to look at to give you a little bit more insight into what's going on?
Great question. So I always look at the sun, moon, and rising. And those are the three pillars that really make up who we are. So the sun, I mentioned before, it's who we are in this lifetime on this planet. Our moon is where we feel nurtured and nourished. It's our emotional self. It's how we feel comforted. Very important, our emotional being, and our rising sign, which is what is on the horizon when we're born, what sign. Like if we went and looked at the sky when you, Annabelle, were born, what was there? And when we see that, that's such an important transition because we're coming from this celestial kind of in between dreamtime world where, yeah, we're in a body, we're in our mother's body, but we're still really connected into the spiritual realm and we're not independent yet. We haven't come out and the cord hasn't been cut. And so it's a very big portal to me. It's a big gateway that we come in through at that moment and that sign. And so the rising sign is looked at both our soul self, like who our soul self is, but also how people see us because it's on the cusp of the first house. And the first house is who we are physically. We're a separate being. You know, I have this body, you have your body, like that. And so different signs can have different qualities or facial features or designations associated with them. And they're not always prominent. Like a lot of times people with Leo have lots of hair, like a lion's mane, right? So it's not like there's a cookie cutter prototype in
Yeah.
every Leo. But I have to say, I had somebody who came recently who was a Leo with like a big shock of hair, right? Because she had a lot of Leo in her chart. So it's kind of interesting. I wouldn't hold it like a strong, script that it's that way, but it can often line up that way. So I'll look at the three big ones. I'll look at what signs, I'll look at what house the sun and moon is in, and I'll look at the elements of that because that's like a predominant signature of the person. And then in terms of like specific planets, really the way I work very kinesthetically and intuitively. So I will look at a chart and I will literally let myself just go to what pops out. Like this just happened. I have a new client. I was just looking at their chart and it was like Neptune. Why? Well, it was on one hemisphere of the chart and a lot of planets are on the other one. So there was like this visual there, sort of on its own, still in communication with other planets, but it just physically drew my eyes in. And then I started there and I'll sort of piece things together in that way. So it's one way I do it. And another is I'll look at what is happening in the sky now, which are called the transits. So where is Pluto now? So I'll look at that and then I'll look and I'll see, is it making major contact with one of the person's planets? Because especially Pluto is one of those big outer planets that will stay in a position for a while. So I'll give you an example from my own life. I had Pluto come across another really hardworking planet, Saturn, and it just felt like hard work for a couple of years.
Wow.
Really hard working time. It was wonderful. I mean, I was able to use it and harness it. I knew if I didn't know, I might have said, "Oh gosh, why me?" Like this is feeling a little heavy. Where's where's the levity? It also happened to happen in the pandemic, so it had a little bit of a double edge there. But you know what? I really got to work with astrology and different things that I was studying, and it was a fabulous addition to my life, ultimately, and a fabulous time to look at it. But I'll look at those things because it might be a really great time for someone to study and go back to school. It might be a fabulous time to take a breath, take it easy a little, dream, go on a vacation or pay attention to your health or like that. So I think it's personal. I don't have a signature planet necessarily, like, oh, I must see where everybody's Saturn is. And I do want to know where everybody's Saturn is. And I do want to know what their North Node is, which is not a planet, it's a point, but it talks about our mission in life. And so it is important to me to look at those things as well. I take it in very holistically.
Yeah.
And of course, I take in where the client is. Why are they coming to me? Are they having a really tough time with their boss at work? Are they just wanting growth? Are they struggling with some physical ailment? Like, are they going through cancer? That would have me look at different things or want to highlight certain things just to see what's happening in the sector of health. I might see, hey, what's going on in that house?
Hmm. Yeah, I like that because you were touching on just how to essentially use astrology throughout your life. It's like we have these phases, we have these seasons where things are lighter, where things are much more difficult. And at least with astrology, especially with the transits that you were talking about, it gives us a bit of a clue as to why things might be difficult or where some of these things show up. So you talk
Mhm.
about the houses, and I think for those that are not familiar with astrology, you've got the planets are the what, the sign is the how, and the house is where it's going to show up in your life. And the where could be um, the house of relationships, the house of health, as you mentioned, the house of the home. There are all these different houses have a particular meaning. But transits, going back to what I said earlier with this evolution of ourselves, the evolution of our birth chart doesn't necessarily change, but the things in the sky, the stars, the planets, as you mentioned, are constantly moving and some move quicker than others. And so that also impacts our birth chart, which is static, but the movement that's going on in the sky that will impact and bring up some of these seasonal challenges.
And we are moving, right? We're not static. So let's say you spent a whole career as a painter. You're not going to be painting in the same style in your 20s than in your 70s,
Mm,
right? So it's even our relationship to it. And I loved what you said in the beginning, how when we've been going over your chart, sometimes it's like,
yeah.
wow, I thought, this is this new information. Here I am. My first chart I had read when I was 18. It's 63 now. I just recently I had somebody else look at my chart, I think for my birthday, like a year ago, and I saw a whole thing that I've just never really taken in before. So it moves. Looking at something when you're in one stage of development and looking at it in another, you're just going to see it differently.
Yeah.
If you're open and you're growing and you're fluid that way, if you're not stuck in fear and making yourself small in a box to fit something, we go through stages of our growth, and our chart goes through stages like that too. And then, of course, as you mentioned, there's the transits and what's happening in the sky now, and that's going to impact everybody a little differently. Right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love what you said about having your chart read another time because I've had some clients say to me, like, oh, I've had a reading before. And I think the important thing to know with that is that there are also different types of readings to get. So you
Yeah.
can have just your traditional birth chart reading. There are solar return readings. So you mentioned your birthday, right? You can every year, there's essentially a new flavor or a new theme that might come into play. And that is for your birthday year. And there are different types of things to look at, or when you have a Saturn return at your 28th, 29th birthday. That might be a good time to do a reading too, because that could be a difficult time. Saturn tends to bring hard lessons, the disciplinarian of the chart, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love that. And there are these major times. There's our Uranus opposition, where Uranus was when we were born, and then where it goes when it goes halfway around its cycle. When that happens, we in the States call it our midlife crisis. Because you're right, Uranus is the planet of surprise. It's the planet of invention. It's the planet of freedom. It's going to have us look, whether we're conscious of it or not, at like, what were all our hopes and dreams and aspirations? And did we do some of them? Or if we didn't, we might feel like, oh, hell, I have to bust out, you know? Not everybody feels that way because it depends what work you've done. It depends how you've lived your life. But we do all go through some similar transits, and they do mark our lives in positive ways too. They're opportunities. All these things are opportunities, really. So there's no bad transit, there's no
Yes.
bad sign like, oh, shoot, I've got my planets talking in this kind of argumentative way. Hey, great. It's like more fodder out there, right? More juice for your growth, more excitement, really. You could look at it.
I thank you so much for saying that because yeah, I think there can be this feeling of, oh, I don't have a good sign, or oh, that probably doesn't mean something good. Or, what you said earlier, I've heard so many people say, oh, I don't like Virgos, I don't like Scorpio, Geminis have another, you know, when people have said that to me, I've said, no, there is no bad sign. It's really about how you look at it. It is the perspective.
Mhm.
And they are all opportunities. And our teacher would say, turning on the observer,
Mhm.
becoming much more aware of the shadow and accepting the shadow. This is something you and I have worked on. I've had to accept my shadow as much as I've wanted to shut it down, but having to accept it. And I think through looking at my chart, it's called it out much more prominently for me that yeah, that there is that part that's much more vulnerable, that's much more deep. And then accepting it and being aware of when that pops up for me and then
Right.
sitting with it, right?
Hmm.
In certain
Hmm.
instances.
Absolutely. And not just reacting from it, right? Like if we can slow the frames down of our movie that's
Mhm.
happening, of our action, and really give ourselves some space and a home there, it can make a huge difference. Even just that ability to take a breath for a moment and not, boom, go right into some reactive version. And we all have those lessons, whatever they are. For me, I have a lot of lessons around boundaries in my life. It's been a lifelong lesson about boundaries coming in a myriad of ways, like all over the place. And once I saw that, it made it easier to start to do something about that or do something with it, including struggle with it. It's not like, oh, once I knew, hey, I'm on easy street. No, it was really hard for me at certain points in my life in different ways. And it can still be a struggle. There are situations that can still bring that up for me, but I have space for it and it's okay. And then I can work with that. I could take a breath, I could take a moment, and having that objective observer is so important, you know, and doing what we need to do to nurture and care for ourselves.
Yeah. So for people interested in using astrology for their self-discovery or personal growth, what would you say to them? Any thoughts, any tips?
Hmm. I would say it's great to have a healthy dose of skepticism. That is fine. Go at your own pace. Let yourself go with what you're attracted to. If you find somebody on YouTube that speaks to you, great. Listen to them. I mean, there's so many people out there.
Mm.
Uh, Astrology's really had a rebirth. Maybe take a class if it calls to you, study with somebody, but there's so much that you could do on your own as well. Have a reading if you feel inclined. That can really help a lot. One other interesting thing for people who are skeptical, which I really like to do this sometimes, is there's something called the ephemeris, and it's sort of like the Bible of what planet was in what sign in what date. And there's like thousands of years of data of this, right? So sometimes I will do something like pick a major point in my life. Now, if you're a beginner, this might not work, but maybe you can contact somebody who's familiar with the ephemeris and can help you with this. Take something that happened, like I could take my divorce or the death of one of my parents, or and go back and look at what was happening in the sky, the transits, and what was happening. And it has blown me away. The strong mark of my divorce planet around dissolution was in my house of marriage, like that. So I find that sometimes looking backwards can help just verify in a way instead of getting like in that woo woo camp of it's a divination tool and it's going to tell me exactly what I should do.
Right.
You want things to help you in yourself and express yourself, not move away from yourself.
Yeah. Or even thinking back to 28, 29, what was going on then? Because as I mentioned, the Saturn return, I know for me personally, I had gone through a divorce, I was moving, I was pregnant, like I had major change going on in my life and it was so difficult. I don't think I noticed how difficult it was because I was just pushing through, which is very much what I do.
Hmm.
But now that I've obviously time has passed and I've been able to look back, I thought, oh, of course, that was
Hmm.
Saturn coming in. I wasn't really ready for it. And it was a challenging time, but I was taught some major responsibility. Like that's what was going on in my life.
As you said, Saturn is a planet of responsibility and of life lessons, right? And life lessons, like the lessons find us almost, right? It's not necessarily like a lesson like my aspiration, but it's just like the lessons of what we're here to learn. And sometimes we find those lessons, and sometimes those lessons come knocking on our door. And it's also a part of growth. Saturn rules structure and it rules time and it rules maturation. So
Mm.
if you think about it, and especially I think too in this culture, it would be really interesting to look at astrology in different cultures because in this culture, especially the way it is now, we mature at a slower rate now, you know. Like earlier generations, it might have been you were out the door. Now people tend, for all sorts of reasons, because of economics and politics and all sorts of things, tend to be home longer or tend to individuate a little later in many ways. And so that maturation process of Saturn is us becoming who we are, really becoming who we are, like as an adult in the world, right? And so, how easily are we doing that? And what is it we need to learn? And so, during those times of that Saturn return, as you mentioned, people tend to go through major changes like getting married, having a baby, getting divorced, moving, starting a different career, going back to school, like all sorts of bigger things can happen. And if you're listening to this and you feel like, well, hey, nothing big happened to me, sometimes those things are inner. They're not always marked by a huge outer event. It
Mm.
could just be an inner, like it could be, you know what, next time I'm around my family and they're saying this thing that was really hurtful to me or my beliefs, I'm actually going to say something. It could be like that. It could be like that demarcation of where I decided to stand up for myself in some way. So, yeah, it's important to know that sometimes it's not always showy and outward.
Yeah.
Although I, like you, I gave birth during that time. So I did have it bigger, but it doesn't have to be that way.
No, that's true. That's true. Because I think there's both external things that happen or much more internal. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
well, thank you so much for sharing your insights into astrology. And I really hope for those that are listening, if you're curious to learn more, there are, I think, as you rightly said, so many different books and people, astrologers you can look into that can really help to guide you or just provide you some more insights into the topic if that's something you're being called to. Priya, do you take new clients or are you fully booked?
I am not fully booked. I do have room for new clients, both straight astrology clients and also healing or therapy clients or any combination. So, absolutely, you can find me on the web. My website is priyazanderfox.com, and you can find me there. A safe place for healing is my business, and I do work in person. I am in Western Mass, but I also work on the phone or Zoom as well. And I know that you also have wonderful healings and astrology readings. So I would just say to people, just go with your gut, whoever you feel drawn to, and go for it.
Yeah, yeah, just explore it. That's very much my motto is explore it, try it, and if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't resonate, you don't do it. But if there's even a little bit of curiosity, right, just give it a go and see where it takes you. I've found that the more we follow the thing that calls us or the things that we're curious about, it ends up opening all these other doors that maybe we didn't even realize were there originally.
Absolutely. And I just want to emphasize this because you could have a reading or a client could come to you, Annabelle, for a session. And maybe it's not going to be an ongoing, but it could be a stepping stone. Something could have opened up in that healing or that reading that they had with you or with me or anybody that can lead them to the next step. So it's wonderful to be open and to just follow your own knowing or desire or thought or what you're drawn to can be a part of where you're heading.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Priya. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah. I had such a good time with you, Annabelle. Thank you so much. I hope this is helpful for people. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you're interested in becoming a client and working with me, visit me at nunatherapy.com or follow me on social media at Nuna Therapy for regular content and inspiration. Until next time.